Right, so welcome everyone. This is another one of our bite-sized webinars where this week we're going to be talking about those all-important tricky interview questions and how to answer them. Today I'm joined by Mark Grant from Northumberland University, who I will let him introduce himself in a moment, and he is going to help me to decode these tricky questions. Now, in our webinar series, we have already covered a range of different subjects from presentation skills, CV building, and how to prepare for your first graduate job or internship. So all of those can be found over on our YouTube, Enterprise Rent-A-Car Jobs and Careers. First of all, I just want to hand over to Mark so he can introduce himself, and then we're going to get right into the questions. So Mark.
Hi everyone, it's lovely to be here this afternoon with you all. As Louise mentioned, my name is Mark Grant and I'm an Employability Partnership Advisor within the Graduate Futures team at Northumberland University. So essentially, the core component of my role is working on a one-to-one and a one-to-many basis with students, so guiding them through all aspects of employability, helping them to find relevant work experience opportunities. That might be from volunteering, from placements, all the way through to graduate roles. I guess another aspect of my job is working closely with academic staff and with employers, ensuring that kind of core employability content is embedded within the curriculum. And where we have that content, it's as up to date as possible. So those conversations with employers around things like interviews, the techniques, the questions they ask are key to my role. And again, staying on top of those and keeping up to date as much as possible.
Yeah, so Mark is going to be excellent today with all of his hints and tips that he's going to have for us. And yeah, I'm Louise. I've done a couple of these webinars now. I'm the Talent Acquisition Marketing Specialist for Enterprise. So marketing opportunities and recruiting the best new talent. So today we're going to be breaking down 5 of the trickiest interview questions, in my opinion. And in research, these are the 5 most prominent ones that seem to come up in most interviews that people really struggle to answer. Employers ask you these tricky questions to test your knowledge and your confidence, so it's really important that you prepare for them, as it could stand between you and a job opportunity. Some of these seem really simple on the surface, but there is intention behind them, or will be revealed in a moment. So number 1, the first one, why do you want to work here? Did you know that you can almost fail an interview with the first question? Your answer to the first question can potentially get you a job or not get you a job. And quite often this is the first one that does come up. Some candidates see this as a warm-up question, but you could argue that it is probably the most critical one. Now, employers ask this because they want to corner you to see if you've done any research about the company. There is not much point answering this with something like, because I've always wanted to work in this particular company, or I like this industry. It's too broad, and you need to make sure that you're giving substance to that answer. Make sure your answer has real meaning and shows that you've researched that company. Talk about how the company values might align with your own personal values. Talk about the company mission statement. Or you could pick out some charity work, some awards the company has won, any work they've done with social mobility, diversity and inclusion, something really specific that's drawn you to that particular industry. And again, it shows that you've researched that role and you want that particular role rather than you've just applied for any other job. Mark, do you have any tips on this question at all? Why do you want to work here? What would you say to that one?
Yeah, I think for me, when we get to this interview stage, employers are going to be looking at 3 separate things. So they're looking at your skills. Can you do the job? And obviously that will come up in different questions. Your motivations of, do you want a job? And then finally, around your values and your personality, will you fit in with this organization? And as Louise mentioned, it's all about doing as much research as you possibly can and showing that awareness of the culture, of the values, trying to represent that in and reflect that in your answers, and to show that essentially you're going to be the ideal fit from a kind of a personality perspective. So not only can you do the job in terms of your skills and your attributes, but you're going to fit in with that values. You're going to represent the company really well in that sense. As Louise mentioned, I think it comes down to your research and your preparation in advance. So go on and look at the company website. So, most organizations will have the kind of who we are, or heritage or history type pages, where you can get a bit of insight into what they're all about and what they try and represent. You can have a look at things like the social media accounts, see what the current activity is there, or the kind of any particular projects, any incentives that they're working and leading on in collaboration with other organizations, and just get a really good flavor of what they're looking to kind of present and kind of, you know, push themselves out there in that kind of that media image, if you like. Again, you know, try to embed that as much as you possibly can into your responses, and that research may lead to kind of ideas around how that fits in with your career progression. So why it's a relevant organization for you to work with. There may be, you know, particular opportunities, particular support networks that you could draw upon. Essentially, you know, you just got to show really good awareness that you've done your research, you've done your preparation, and fit that in as much as you possibly can. And I guess one of the keys to that is trying to be concise as well. They're not expecting you to know the ins and outs, all the financial figures of the company, you know. But
impressive if you did know that.
It would be helpful, especially if you're going for a finance position. But like I say, just showing that kind of initial level of research and preparation, going beyond probably what's on, you know, the job description or job advert, can, you know, can be a real positive in that sense.
That's great, Mark. Thank you. I think I just want to draw on something you said there about the social media side of things. That is really great. I mean, most companies now will have some sort of social media presence, whether that be on LinkedIn, Instagram, and enterprise in specific. All of our recruiters and marketers have their own individual Instagrams as well. I think most of us do, where we post a lot of what we're up to, any awards we might have won, any careers fairs we might be at. So again, social media is a great way to stay current. Websites aren't always updated regularly, or as regularly as you would like the company to update them. So social media is a great way to keep relevant and on top of what the company's up to. And that's, if you can pick out something the company's done in the last couple of weeks in an interview, that's going to really set you apart from the other candidates.
Again, as well, I think another thing to think is, you know, in certain sectors, you know, kind of in the careers and labour market, thinking about what makes this organisation different from its competitors. Why have you decided to apply to this organisation over someone similar that they compete with? What is it about that organisation that, you know, that stands them apart? And again, you know, a little bit of flattery goes a long way.
It does. It really does. No, that's a great point, Mark. Thank you. So number 2. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? This is what the company is looking for. Do you have a futuristic mindset? Do you have long-term goals? How can this company and this role that you've applied for help you to achieve those? Now, it takes a company a lot of time and money and effort to hire and train new employees. That is just a fact. They want to make sure that they're hiring someone that is there for long term rather than having someone that's there for a quick turnaround. They want to keep their retention numbers good. They want to keep their staff on board for a long period of time. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to work for them for 10 plus years, but you want to go into the company and into the interview thinking that you are going to stick it out for some period of time, you know, at least a couple of years. When answering this, you don't have to profess that you want to stay with the company for the rest of your life. You want to be chained to your office seat and never leave. That's not what they're looking for. But it's good to talk about how you want to progress up the career ladder in a certain role. So again, having the research behind the company and their structure. So, you know, coming into enterprise, you might say, I want to be a branch manager in 2 years. I want to be an area manager in 5 years, because you've done your research and you know that that's attainable. Talk about your continued personal and professional development. Employers love it if you talk about professional development. They want to know where you stand at the moment, what it is that you have left to learn, what you feel like you can improve on. So bringing that into your answer is a really good one. However, you have to make sure you have actual explanations. You don't want to just say, I want to be the CEO in 10 years. That's it. You have to have some sort of substance behind that answer again. Explain how you want to get there and how that company fits in with that career progression and that career ladder that you're wanting to climb up. Mark, again, any hints and tips for this one?
I think you touched on a couple of the key words in there, Louise, of it being attainable. And I think, you know, employers aren't expecting you to have your career mapped out forevermore. Like you're saying that, you know, 2 years' time, I'm going to be in this position, then I'll spend 1 year doing that. And you know, that, well, it's fine. Again, it's fantastic if you can map it out like that, but it, you know, it doesn't always work out that way. But I think the key is that it has to be realistic. So if you've got a fairly realistic career plan, and the key, as Louise mentioned, that it's, you know, it's achievable within that organization. You know, you don't want to say, well, I'm going to do this, you know, this is a bit of a stepping stone position, then I'm going to jump to a competitor or go into this different area, you know, something that's completely illogical to the position you're applying for. So yeah, keep it really realistic in terms of there's a clear kind of pathway. It doesn't have to be, like I say, concrete in that sense of exactly which way you want to go, but as long as there's a direction in that it's achievable within that organization. So as Louise mentioned, if you've got a little bit of insight into potentially what the next steps could look like, or different roles that are available within that structure, whether it be the next step into management or a leadership position, that's fantastic. And I think you're right in what you say, Louise, around professional development and, you know, having that kind of future thinking mentality. If you can talk about, you know, additional training that you'd be interested in doing, if there's any additional qualifications linked to the job that you could pick up, to show a real desire and a kind of a willingness to learn and to wanting to grow. In that sense, that can be a real positive going into that interview environment. But yeah, I think it is just that forward thinking mentality, showing that there is that kind of, you know, desire to continue to grow from a professional development perspective.
Absolutely. And if you want to take a little bit of an extra step as well, this is one of the things that I used to do in some of my previous interviews before I got this role. It's a little bit nerdy, it's a little bit much, but that is me. I used to actually make a professional development planner, which was sort of my career history, and then my projections on maybe what I wanted to earn, or, you know, where I wanted to be and how I wanted to get there, any, like Mark said, any extra training I took on. And when presented with this question, the best thing you can do is say, oh, actually, I've got a spreadsheet here which details everything out. So you don't have to do it, you absolutely don't, but it's sometimes nice even just for your own record to have, you know, a tangible material there that you can go back and look on. And it's a really nice little added thing in an interview if you hand that over. I know someone gave that to me in an interview, I would just be, wow, amazing, come work for me now. You took the initiative to make a professional development planner. So yeah, have a little Google into PDPs, how to make them. There are some structures online that you can actually follow. You don't have to be an Excel whiz. But yeah, that's a nice little added touch as well that can help with this question. Perfect. Moving on. What is your biggest weakness? Now, in my opinion, this is a question I always dread answering. I hate when anyone asks me this question, but it is a super common interview question. You have to answer the question. You know, you can't just say, I've got no weaknesses, I'm perfect the way I am. You might be, but an interviewer doesn't want to hear that. You don't want to say, I don't have any known weaknesses, and you also don't want to be too honest. So you don't want to sit there and say, oh, I'm rubbish at X, Y, and Z. That's not going to get you the job. What you need to do is be modest, be aware of those weaknesses, but I actually call them opportunities for improvement as opposed to weaknesses. So it kind of flips it on its head. So you are saying you've got a weakness, but it doesn't necessarily hold you back. You're just saying it's something that you can improve on. So for example, whenever I'm asked this, it's a really generic one. I always say I'm a perfectionist, because it is a bit of a backhanded weakness, because being a perfectionist is great in that you will take on loads of work and employers love that. You'll do the work to the best of your ability. However, it can mean that you're maybe a little bit too hard on yourself and maybe give yourself a little bit too much stress. So I always say perfectionist. Mark, how would you answer this question? What would you say your biggest weakness was?
Oh, it's a tough one. You put me on the spot.
It's an interview.
You could have warned me about that. I think you're exactly right what you're saying, that weakness has a kind of a negative connotation, doesn't it? So people think, oh God, I don't want to say anything that's going to kind of, weigh me down and kind of in the kind of the ranking order of the interview. So you're right, it's flipping it on its head and making it as positive as you possibly can. And I think exactly what you said before, don't pick something that's going to, make the employers question your ability to do the job. So if you're going for a finance position and saying, oh, I'm not particularly keen on Excel, or I'm not particularly keen analyzing data, and I see that as a weakness. So, if that's going to be in the essential criteria to get you the job, you probably want to avoid those things. I think it is good to show self-awareness of kind of your strengths and weaknesses. And if you complete a kind of a non-essential skill in that role, that's fantastic as well. So I think, as an example, you could say something like, not particularly confident in kind of group presentations, but the key I'd always say is show that you've been really proactive to take steps to make an improvement in that area. So, you've identified that issue. It could be, you started university, you weren't particularly confident in the group setting, you didn't really want to present. So the next project that came up, you tried to take on a leadership role within that group, and you did the bulk of the presenting to try and improve, to put yourself out your comfort zone, to improve your confidence in that particular area. So immediately yes, there is the kind of the perceived weakness there. You've identified that, you've shown that self-awareness, but you've actively taken those steps to make that improvement. It comes back to that professional development point that we're not all going to be perfect. We aren't the finished article as we head into these roles, but if we can identify those gaps, knowledge, skills, and actively take those steps to kind of make those improvements, that's the key. And that's what employers love to see. Like I say, they're not expecting someone to come in as the finished article. There's going to be little gaps in kind of areas there that we can all improve in. So it is a case of flipping that perceived negative and make it as positive, as you possibly can.
Absolutely, Mark. And again, talking about those areas of opportunity, you can almost highlight that something was a weakness, but it no longer is a weakness, and an interview will take that. So you can say, I used to really struggle with my time management. However, I've attended some different training courses. I've watched some videos on how to manage my time. I've placed a few spreadsheets to help keep me on track. And now I find that I am getting better at it. Or if a job description says that you need to have knowledge or it's recommended that you have knowledge in a particular statistical software or something along those lines, you can say, well, I don't actually have experience in that, so I would see that as a slight weakness. However, I've gone and I've done some online training, I've watched some videos, I've tried to expose myself to that software as much as possible in the hope that it wouldn't hinder me from getting a role. So like Mark said, flip it on its head, talk about it as an area of improvement. And interviewers aren't expecting you to be perfect, nobody is. So do make sure you answer that question. Don't just say, I haven't got any weaknesses, I am perfect. Next one. So what interests you about this role? Now, it might not seem like a super tricky question, this one, but this is an employer fishing to see how well you've done your research. Again, we've already spoke about this in the first question, but this one is a little bit different. You want to make sure that you've got a clear understanding of the actual role that you've applied for rather than the company as a whole. So that is how these two questions differ. It can be really hard if you are bulk applying for roles on Indeed or LinkedIn, say, and you might kind of lose track of which ones you've applied for. You're really excited that you get an interview and then they say, you know, what interests you about this role? And you think, oh, I've applied for 25 jobs in the last 2 weeks. I haven't got a clue what this is. I'm just happy to have an interview, which is fine. But you want to make sure that you familiarize yourself with the job description prior to going into the interview. If an interviewer asks this question and you give a vague answer, you are less likely to be successful, as it's clear that you've not even bothered to read up on the job description. You can be honest about the parts of the job description that you might not understand. If it is a role that you're going into which you haven't had any experience in, or it's not something that you are too familiar with, it's absolutely fine to say, oh, there's actually aspects of that job that I'm not familiar on. Can you educate me on them? But you can say, from the job description, I understand that this is kind of what I'll be doing day to day. These are the skills I need. Just something that draws on that you do have some sort of surrounding knowledge about that job role, and how your skills can fit into it, which we will touch on in the next slide. Again, I'm going to hand over to Mark here for his expertise in this question and sort of what you would add to that one.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything there. And this is where it comes back to, as Louise mentioned, those adverts that you're applying to. And my advice is always, if there is a separate job description, just make sure you save those documents and you've got them prepared, because often when you may apply for a job, as Louise said, they can then disappear. So they're not in the same place they were before. They're taking them down once the position's closed, and you're preparing for the next stage and you haven't got those documents to hand. So just save them, even if it's putting it into a Word document or screenshotting, so you have those to hand. I think when we look back at the advert, that core list of responsibilities is key, and it is shown like a good level of knowledge and preparation, that you have a good grasp of what the role entails, who you're going to be collaborating with if you're working across multiple teams, multiple departments, how you can make a really positive impact in that particular role. So, how can you go in, what are you going to be contributing, what does it kind of work towards in terms of, targets and team goals. And as Louise said, you're not expected to kind of say, yeah, I'm an expert in this, every single one of those things. But if you can, you can tick off the bulk of that, that's absolutely fantastic. When we go back to those, what is an employer looking for? I think this comes into that kind of the motivations. Do you actually want this job? Have you got a genuine passion, a genuine interest in, certain aspects of the role that you're going to be doing, where you can, lend your skills, your expertise, and really have a, a positive impact, and has those achievements that those employers are looking for as well. But yeah, I think it is a case of picking out those highlights that match your career aspirations, match your passions, and really showing a good level of preparation and knowledge about where you can make that impact.
Perfect, thanks, Mark. And again, we did a webinar a couple of weeks back about applying for jobs, and one of the main tips that came out of that was, as much as sometimes it can seem beneficial to apply for 20, 30 jobs on quick apply on Indeed at once, it's actually a lot more beneficial to really concentrate on an application and apply for 5 to 10 maybe, just so then you are actually grasping exactly what it is you're applying for. You can really prep for those interviews if you were given them, and it is in the forefront of your mind as to what you've applied for. If you apply for loads, it's great, but you're going to lose track of those job descriptions and probably not do as well in the interviews. So yeah, going back to what we did in the webinar a couple of weeks ago, which obviously, like I said, you can find on our YouTube, sticking to 5 to 10 maximum, I would say, is a good place to start. Perfect. And this is the last question. So how do your skills fit this role? Again, it's testing two things. Number one, your skill set, and number two, your research. If you haven't learned by the end of this presentation that research is important, I don't think you've picked up anything. So research is where it is here. Now, this is a question that enables you to really sell yourself. More than likely, the job description will list those necessary skills that you need to do the job. So like Mark said, make sure you're taking a screenshot of that, because they do disappear. I think they do that on purpose to make it hard, but yeah, take a screenshot, make sure you've got those skills, and then you can draw on those skills whilst you're doing your interview. So make sure, like I said, refresh that job description in your mind before starting that interview. So you've got a key idea of the skills, maybe take a couple of the skills on that job description and talk about your life experience and how that relates to those skills. Don't just list them. So don't say, I have X, Y, and Z, because we know that you're probably just reading off the job description, but talk about those transferable skills that you've learned at university, that you've learned at your part-time job, any voluntary work, in sports teams. You can really draw on anything. So sports teams teach you teamwork, it teaches you competitiveness, leadership. Voluntary work teaches you about charities and organisations and helping others and customer service, as can work experience. So really sit and think about the transferable skills that you've learned and how you can apply it to that role. For example, as well, you can say things like, if they say that time management is a large part of this role, you may be remote working, it's up to you to manage your schedule. You can say, I've managed to develop my time management because I've completed a university degree whilst working part-time. It really is as simple as that. You've juggled two things at once, you've succeeded in both of them. That is an excellent explanation in my eyes. It doesn't have to be a super flourished answer, just draw on your life experience and how it's relevant to that role. Mark, again, handing over to you.
Yeah, honestly, just to kind of echo all of those comments, I think it is going back to that job description, looking at that person's specification, thinking what was essential, what those desirable skills are. If you can embed some of the desirable, often they'll have that kind of secondary list of other things they're looking for. So if you can mention some of those as well. But I think a couple of key points is that it can be technical in terms of related to the role and the kind of the technical skills and knowledge that are all required, but ultimately a lot of it can be around those transferable skills. And I think certainly one of the questions that I get, or kind of one of the challenges that students raise with me, is that I don't have experience in that particular area. But I think, as Louise mentioned, you can talk about any kind of context, whether it be your part-time work, if you've worked in, retail, hospitality, as lots of kind of undergraduate students will have done, and you can make that relevant to the job you're applying for. So it could be around, your time management, your communication skills, your ability to kind of to organize, to kind of lead, whatever. Use those examples from that setting and try and link it back to the job wherever possible. So try and, if you can, demonstrate those skills in that setting, then it's equally as valuable in the job you're applying for as well. So it can be from any different area. And again, if you can highlight where you've had particular achievements or where you've made a really positive impact, that can be really successful in the interview setting as well. But as Louise said, you don't just want to kind of rattle them off as a list and say, well, for communication, I did this. For, try and pick out some key points that are, particularly relevant to the role that you're applying to.
Absolutely, thanks, Mark. And again, most employers aren't expecting you, unless stated that you need 5+ years of experience in that field. They are more than likely just going to be looking at those transferable skills. So again, thinking about Enterprise, an example, we are a graduate management training program in a business industry. However, we will accept people with degrees from any discipline because it is those transferable skills. So regardless of what degree you may have, a lot of employers similar to Enterprise will be looking more at what it is that you've learned and taken from that experience, and how you can then apply it to the role. So key takeaways from today: stay calm is number one. That is always the first piece of advice I give in an interview. Stay calm, take a deep breath, prepare and research, and sell yourself. That is really all you need to do, those 3 takeaways. In my opinion, preparing and researching is the most important thing. I think, especially in today's market with recruitment, I think that there's a lot of opportunities out there. There's a lot of people applying for jobs, more so than pre-pandemic. So you are in a bigger pool of talent, which can sometimes make things a little bit harder. So all of the extra research you can do, it is really going to set you out from the rest of the crowd. And there are plenty of different resources that you can find. Like I mentioned already, Enterprise have been running these webinars for many weeks now, and we have different webinars for each stage of job application process, all the way up to getting your first job. So please do head over to our YouTube to have a little look at the ones that have been pre-recorded, because there is loads of helpful hints and tips on there. And we do have a question, Mark. So I'm going to hand this one over to you, and then I can chip in the end, because I feel like I've been doing a lot of talking today. We have a question. How would you answer the question, tell me about yourself? Really good question, that one.
I think it's another one of those really tricky questions, isn't it, that we often get, and often can trip us up in an interview where we think, oh, yeah, I haven't really prepared for that. But again, I think it's often the starting point, which is the hardest. Where do the employers want you to go back to? They want you to kind of say, well, I went to this primary school, I went to then. So, I think it's thinking of the relevance to the job. And for me, it's talking about kind of where your passion originated from. So I'd keep it relevant to the job still. So talk about why you chose to go down a particular academic path, what led you to kind of deciding about kind of a career path that you're interested in. So talk about your passions and your interests that are relevant to the job. And then if you can touch on, again, things that you do on a kind of an extracurricular basis. So if you're really active in sport and societies, but again, trying to draw upon some of the skills and experiences that would be relevant to the position that you're applying to, that's going to be really advantageous as well. But yeah, keep it concise. They're not expecting to kind of have your family history in a kind of a response within a couple of minutes. Keep it relevant to the job and give them a really good overview of, like I say, your passions and your desire to work in that particular area.
Yeah, great answer, Mark. I think as well, a lot of the time when people that are doing your interview are asking you to tell you about yourself, it is quite often as well they're wanting to see how you'll fit in with their team, if your personality sort of matches up with the company ethos. So again, just try and get your personality across and say, as much as the things that Mark are talking about are super important, the extracurricular activities, it is also about your hobbies and what it is that you like to do outside of work and what makes you you. Again, you don't have to go into a massive ramble about every single thing that you do at the weekend, but a brief overview of, I'm really into fitness, I'm really creative, I'm a musician, just so they can get a brief overview of you and your personality, I think is a good one as well. And we have another question here. How would you answer the question, what motivates you? I'll start this one because it is a question that I have asked in interviews. I think sometimes it's really great when you get an answer that's, someone says what particular person motivates them. I do like that. I think it's nice and personal. It adds, again, that element of personality. However, in a job interview, you could maybe say career progression or salary progression or professional development. So tangible outcomes and rewards in your career. So for me personally, I would say career development, recognition, validation from management, getting some praise and recognition. So just be honest with it and think, what is it that really helps motivate me in a job role? You don't have to go super deep with it. You don't have to start listing off motivational people that you like to listen to. You can if you want, but I think with this question, it's quite easy to just keep it specific and just say, this is what motivates me in my career. And it is career progression, salary, whatever. What about you, Mark?
Yeah, they're really good points. And I think another one, again, another perspective, I guess, is you could talk about, the environment in a sense of a work-related sense of what motivates you. So it could be, being part of a really energetic team. It could be, kind of managing multiple deadlines, ongoing projects that can bring out the best of you. So I think, either way, but as Louise mentioned, you don't need to go too in depth about it. Keep it really concise and give them a good overview of kind of, your personality and, how that impacts you in the kind of the workplace.
Absolutely. And I'm being told there's no more questions. So that is the end of today's webinar. Thank you again to everyone for coming to watch. And this will be put up again on our YouTube channel in the next couple of days or a week. So you can rewatch if you did miss the start. And thank you again to Mark again for coming and working on me with this one. It's been really, really great to get your input and those really helpful hints and tips. So thank you again for joining me today.
No, thanks everyone. Love being part of these sessions. Yeah, thank you.
No worries at all. And we will be, like I said, putting this up on our other streaming platforms, and you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn if you do have any questions about enterprise and our graduate opportunities, and also keep up to date with our social medias like we were saying. So have a great rest of your Tuesday, everyone. And thank you so much for watching. And thanks again, Mark.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Cheers. Bye now.